hope it's going to be worth your time. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Yesterday's talk was 45 minutes, so at the very latest, I'll be ending here at 10:25 for those that want to go to Mass at 10:30. So my name is Colin Faust. For those of you that don't know me, I've been a parishioner here since 2018. I just recently got hired here as the new Director of Discipleship and Evangelization. So, thank you. So here's my story. I grew up in Laconia, so I've been around here for a long time, this area. And the first notable thing that happened was when I was in 8th grade, 9/11 happened, and that had a profound impact on me. My dad was always interested in military history. So ever since 9/11 and the wars began in Iraq in 2003 and Afghanistan in 2001, I followed them really attentively, really closely. I read all the biographies, the autobiographies, followed all the news stories. I knew everything that was going on. And really early on, by like 9th grade, it really sparked an intense desire to actually participate in what I had been reading about. So from like 9th grade, 10th grade on, despite being a 3.999 GPA student in high school with a lot of academic potential and scholarships and everything, everybody thought I was crazy for wanting to join and enlist in the Marine Corps, not even take the officer route. So after careful discernment with my family and parents and everything, I did do that. And this is my graduating picture from Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. And this is I was 19 years old. And this is actually in 2009. 2008? I don't remember. 2008. I was 19 years old. I guess what matters, right? So in the Marine Corps, my job was I was a forward observer. I was entrusted with the safe and effective coordination of all of our fire support assets. That includes like eyes on the ground, calling in mortars, artillery, rockets, all the air support, fixed wing, rotor wing, and even naval gunfire. Right? I went to unique school just to learn how to call in naval gunfire. And I actually got top honor grad in every single course that I ever attended, which I sound really prideful probably sharing that, but it's actually relevant to the story as I'll articulate my conversion experience. Long story short, I worked my way into this unit called 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. It's based out of Camp Pendleton, California, part of the 1st Marine Division. A small battalion is roughly 900, 1,000 Marines. This is actually it. That's 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. I'm in there somewhere. It's usually divided up into 5 companies, 3 infantry line companies, a weapons company, and a headquarters company. So for that whole company, I was entrusted with the forward observer duties and also training small unit leaders, like squad leaders, how to call in fire support assets. And then this is one of the companies. I was in Lima Company, so like I said, there's all these companies there. There's Lima Company, Kilo Company, India Company, Weapons Company, and Headquarters Company. I was part of Lima Company, which is this right here, I'm by the MRAP back there. I'm not going to point myself out, but this is in the Mojave Desert. This is our final unit training before we actually deployed to Afghanistan. And I'll just share, I guess part of me feels really embarrassed to share these because I've never been the cool guy ever in life, but I was a lot cooler then than I am now, that's for sure. I'm being the theology guy now. I used to be a lot cooler. But also at the same time, I kind of want to point out that externally, I would say that I possessed kind of like a false humility. I was definitely feeling myself throughout the Marine Corps, being the top, graduate of all these courses, top PFT. I was super motivated. There's nobody that could match my skills with forward observer, probably in the entire Marine Corps at my rank. I was definitely feeling myself. There was definitely pride there. That was internal. It wasn't external. I'm a firstborn. I was always, a rule follower. Authority was never a problem with me. You can actually kind of see it in that picture. Me going back to these pictures, I can kind of see it in facial expressions. And then there's a picture of my brother and sister. This is prior to deployment. So I was part of 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, and part of our pre-deployment process was we get to come home on pre-deployment leave. Our last little visit with the family and everything prior to flying out to Afghanistan. And it was during this time, this is my family, a picture taken during that pre-deployment leave, It was during this time that my grandma had a family function, who was a cradle Catholic, pulled me aside and gave me a miraculous medal. Up to this point, my whole spiritual faith life I was a lukewarm Lutheran. Kind of indifferent to religion. I guess I professed intellectually that I believed in Christ and that I claimed the title of Christian. But it was very superficial. It was shallow. Didn't translate at all into how I carry myself in my life, my actions, my priorities, my values. Pretty much nothing. It's just kind of nominally Christian, superficial faith. And especially during pre-deployment, it was more of like an insurance policy for me, right? So like, if that happened, yeah, Christian, I'll be good, right? So as a lukewarm Lutheran, my grandma gave this to me, and I had no idea what it was. I didn't even know Mary was on the medal. But being a good grandson, I was respectful and polite. I said, thanks, Grandma, for the gift. Took it. And for whatever reason, I actually took it to Afghanistan because she told me to wear it on all the patrols and everything. I took it over to Afghanistan, and it turns out that it's the only thing that I still have to this day that was on my body when I got home. And this is going to be kind of the thread that weaves through my whole story, binds it together, especially with the conversion aspect. So normally I go into detail on what the miraculous medal is. It's a sacramental of the church. It's really rich in symbolism. I'm not going to go through everything here. But it's a sacramental of the church. The sacraments confer grace efficaciously. They're efficacious signs of grace. Sacramentals are occasions of grace. So basically it's an occasion by which Mary, as our mother, can intercede and be your advocate and attain for you special graces, work miracles, conversions, cures, stuff like that. So that's that. Here's a picture of me the morning of, I think it's like 4 a.m. there. The morning getting bussed out to the airfield to fly over to Afghanistan. So the deployment that we're tasked with, we're queued for Sangin, Afghanistan. That's northeast Helmand. I don't know if any of you have heard of Sangin before, but if any of you are familiar with the relevance and significance of Fallujah for Iraq as the most notorious, bloodiest battle, right? Sangin was that for Afghanistan. We got there in 2010, so the campaign started in 2001. Sangin had not been touched. There was little crappy patrol bases established by the British Marines, but nobody had the mission or the fortitude to actively patrol or secure the area. That was our job. So with that said, the Taliban there had about 10 years to fortify, entrench themselves, and prepare for the imminent, inevitable occupation by us. And of course, my unit was sent there to secure the area and clear it. It was very, 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 very dangerous, about the size of Victoria, roughly. And there's just thousands of bombs and IEDs and entrenched positions, murder holes. I'll show you. Maybe I'll show you what those are coming up here. But markets were shut down. Farmers, the civilian population couldn't confidently go walk anywhere without a significant risk of stepping on an IED. Schools were shut down. There was IEDs all over the schools. It was really bad. So Sangin, there's only one highway going north-south, and this is it. It's called the 611. It's a unique city in that to the west of it, it's all greenery, it's beautiful, it's fertile farmland. That's the area that I operated in, my little patrol base. And I'll show you some pictures of that area. It looked just like Minnesota. I was there in September and October, in the fall. It was beautiful. But to the east, it was all deserty mountains for whatever reason. It was a really bizarre place. But this is where the Taliban funded a lot of their operations to the opium trade. There's a lot of opium fields. So with the unique place that we were in, it called for a lot of very unique theater-specific tactics, techniques, and procedures. So we did a lot of unorthodox things in this area. One of them being all of our patrol routes. We stayed off of all the, all the paths, all the normal walkways, etc. We tried to be as unpredictable as possible. So with that said, every patrol we were going on, we were crossing rivers, we were patrolling through cornfields. I was the navigator. It's in alignment with my skill set as a foreign observer. So life was really simple. Of course, we didn't have communication. Life consisted basically of patrolling, preparing for patrols, eating, sleeping, standing watch, and filling sandbags. That was about it. And I guess I should have said that in Sangin, we got further divided, and I was at this really remote patrol base called Patrol Base Holness. and only a platoon of Marines occupied that. It was like 20 to 30 of us max. And the size of that little patrol base is probably the size of the PACE Center plus this presentation room. Pretty small. I'll show you some pictures here coming on. So the only other thing I just wanted to maybe highlight that's interesting is all of these, there's these walls, these 6 to 5 foot walls everywhere. And they're hardened, mudded walls that have been there for centuries, and there's kind of a recurring running joke over there. These things are impenetrable. Like rockets couldn't penetrate them. Only every now and then, like 1,000 or 2,000 pound JDM bomb dropped from a plane could crumble apart, but it's like an engineering marvel. I don't know what it is, but yeah, they're pretty much impenetrable. So the Taliban would actually drill holes through there and engage us through those holes with really good cover. All these pictures were taken from deployments after ours. They're actually not from me or my deployment, even though each unit has a combat photographer. So it was really rare when I was there to actually see kids out and about. It actually only happened once. He was probably a scout. Yeah, so there's a lot of orchards and greenery, trees, fields. These are all just pictures from literally the area that I patrolled. Again, they're crossing, crawling on banks. Eventually the Taliban would adapt and they start planting the IEDs in the riverbanks. And it wouldn't be uncommon to come across, families where, again, the civilian population themselves, they would step on and trigger all these IEDs as well. Really sad. Here's a little path, makeshift road right outside of the patrol base that I was on. Same thing, looking the other way. And so here's my patrol base. It's on the left there. It was right on the bank of a river. That's combat engineers building a bridge to cross this river. All of our operations were across the river here to the west. So here's some pictures of the patrol base. There's that river. This is the entrance on the other side of the patrol base there, the east side. This is on inside of the patrol base. Little cave systems where we sleep. That's literally where I slept, in one of those caves on that cod. And this is also another place that I slept when we first got to that base. You see that pestle barrier on the other side? Right at the base of that, I slept, and actually 2 weeks prior to us getting there, a British Marine got killed by the British were occupying these patrol bases before us. You see the stairs going up there. There's a guard post, a watchtower, and one of the British Marines got sleepy, complacent. Taliban snuck up, lobbed a grenade right over that pestle barrier, and killed a British Marine right there. You can see, we're drying off a lot of clothes because, again, we're, patrolling the water every day, so there's a lot of drying racks. Just some more pictures from the base. But here's what's really relevant. So I already shared this picture. You see that observation post there to the left. This is inside of that, looking out west over that river. And this is relevant because I'm going to share the story of the day that I got blown up, and it all kind of unfolds outside from that view, from that vantage point to the west, across that river, in these fields back there. So when I was there, half this field was harvested, half of it wasn't. It was a cornfield. And if you can see, way out there, you can see those walls that I was telling you about. It's about 800,000 meters away, about half a mile. There's these orchards lined by those walls back there. You can hopefully see them in this really low resolution photo, right? So I'll share the story of the day that I got blown up. And I could definitely go into, I could give an hour speech on this alone, but I'll condense it to hopefully the most compelling parts of it. The day started early in the morning before the sun came up with a reconnaissance patrol. We got intel on a new area, scouted it out. It went well, went perfect. Nobody got hurt. But on our way back, we mounted a security posture in this field right across the river there. A nice little security arc, because we were going to link up with another patrol that was actively patrolling and enter friendly lines together, because the process of entering friendly lines was complex and made sense to do together. So we're mounted in this security posture, and I'm not going to go into detail about this, but for the first time ever on the deployment, we saw a vehicle driving towards us through the field right at us. So that's suspicious. The squad leader has me and another Marine stop the car, search it, secure it, and we did that. That was, kind of nerve-wracking on its own. All you're thinking about is like, when's this thing going to explode? But it was just a guy and a girl in there, and no weapons, nothing suspicious. Turns out it was a diversion because the Taliban were setting up a pretty sophisticated L-shaped ambush while we were, preoccupied and with So, car leaves, we all get back down. Me as the patrol navigator, I'm the first one up. Right when I get up, shot goes right by the head. Get down. We're all surveying, where did the shot come from? We're used to taking pot shots every time we do a patrol. At the very least, you're taking pot shots. Rarely would the Taliban actually engage in a sustained, gunfight, because they will know what happens if that happened. If they opt for that. So this time was different. We were searching. I was actually the first person to see in those orchards back there. The corner of one of those orchards. This isn't a picture of that, but it's similar. There was a V-shaped cutout with some rubble. It was a really common area that we were receiving fire from. We did drop some bombs over there, and it did bring down part of that wall in the corner. So there was this. I saw about a quarter of a torso, a wood butt of an AK-47, and I got permission to engage with the tracer. Your first round with the tracer, you see it. So I marked the location. The second I shoot, all heck breaks loose all around us. There's about 30 Taliban that set up an L-shaped ambush in all of those orchards, but also to the south. So it was an L. There's a wood line to the south. So we were taking fire from a lot of positions there. So we get into a really long firefight. I ended up calling in guns and rockets run from Cobra on a lot of those positions. Roughly, it was like half hour to an hour firefight. Got to the point where we were depleted. We ran out of revolver ammo. And, we're right outside of our patrol base, so we buddy rush back. And buddy rush is like a leapfrog movement, where 2 Marines will rush 30 yards, while the rest provides continual suppressive fire. It's just a really common maneuver. So, but I distinctly remember during one of those bursts where I'm running with a buddy, looking down at like the RPK trail, an enemy machine gun trail, just like trailing my footsteps. And that was really surreal, because that's stuff like you see in the movies, but you don't really ever expect that's going to happen in real life. But that was pretty crazy. But it turns out, after all that, after this really eventful day so far, we all get back to the patrol base unharmed. Nobody steps on an IED. Nobody gets shot. We're all good. But when we get back to the patrol base, our platoon commander, Lieutenant Kelly, tells us, "Hey, replenish your ammo. Get back up. You're going right back out. We're going to ambush from the south. The area that we're receiving fire from. More than likely, they had retreated back into the villages, and they broke contact. But nevertheless, we do a battle damage assessment, where we get intelligence and look for all the things that we're trained to look for to get intelligence from the area that we're receiving fire from. So, we do that. We enter these orchards, those and those pictures that I just showed you. The Taliban, like I said, they retreated back into the villages. So we're doing our battle damage assessment. We spent about an hour going through that wood line, the orchards, and I even searched that corner that I first engaged, and also, I had that V-shaped rubble. And it was all clear. We did our thing. We were about ready to head back, and the squad leader says, "Faust, take the combat engineer, go search that corner one more time," because it was a suspicious corner. We knew there was presence there. Most of the time, the IEDs that we find were through noticing something's out of place. It's vision. It's not even the minesweeper. Believe it or not, those things are very carefully calibrated. The Taliban knew exactly how to evade detection with the metal composition of the explosives they used, how deep they're burying things. They were very smart. So most of the times, the metal detectors, the minesweepers, they wouldn't pick up any IEDs. So anyways, I take this combat engineer over there. He's about 5 meters, 6 meters in front of me. And I specifically remember telling him, "Let's not be complacent. I know we're over here already once, but let's do our due diligence here. Let's do this carefully. Keep an eye on this rubble. Look for anything out of place. Because those pressure plates, they're buried right beneath. It's very, very difficult to tell where they are." So it turns out he ends up stepping right over the pressure plate that I would end up stepping on. And of course, like I said, the minesweeper didn't pick it up. And I take a left step. By the way, this is what a pressure plate looks like. Just usually 2 plates, connects to charge, give enough pressure, that is the explosive. So I end up taking a left step, and a lot happens in the first, I'd say 2 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds. So here's what happens. I take that left step. First thing I remember is a metallic ping noise. Maybe it was those pressure plates connecting to charge. It was a very distinctive ping, like a metallic ping. I remember hearing it. Next thing, I remember a big cloud of dust. Next thing, I remember looking down at the ground from like 10 feet in the air. Maybe it was 10, I don't know, it was maybe 10 feet. It's just kind of just me guessing. But the next thing was a feeling of disorientation, confusion. Again, I was a hotshot Marine with an indestructible mentality that you never, despite seeing these things happen to people all around, you never think it's going to be you, right? It's that foolish hubris of the 21-year-old Marine, right? So I was confused. By the time I hit the ground, within a couple seconds, my very next thought was, okay, I figured out what happened. I stepped on an IED. My next thought was, I got about a coin's flip chance of surviving this because we were very well trained for this and we've seen it happen. Bottom line is your team around you has about 40 seconds. With arterial bleeding, they got to get tourniquets on in about 40 seconds to survive. So that's, and we were trained for all that. I mean, we were all carrying like 4 tourniquets on our own bodies, and my team was right there. So my next thought was I got about 50-50 shot of surviving this. Thankfully, my team did come over, and I'll get to that. But my very next thing that I did was I actually said a prayer. And again, I wasn't really particularly religious at this point. It was again a lukewarm faith. But I said about a 10-second prayer, and to this day I don't really know what I prayed, but I just remember praying something, right? And by the end of that prayer, that's when the pain and the shock and the chaos really set in. And that by that time, that's when the team gets to me. There's a Navy corpsman medic that was out with us, and he thankfully put I had 5 tourniquets total put on me, 2 on the left leg, 2 on the right leg, and then 1 on my arm, because my arm was ripped open pretty much to the bone from the wrist to the elbow. And believe it or not, that's what hurt most out of all my injuries, because your legs, what's left of your legs, usually go numb, the tourniquets after a couple minutes. So obviously I stepped on a bomb. I think if you see me around church, you get a sense of, I lost my left leg above the knee. My right leg was just really hanging there. It was just ripped open, it was shredded. I'm very lucky to have it. I'll explain that later. It's an experimental case where they did a lot of groundbreaking experimental things with my leg to save it. It was the most severe limb salvage that I think surgeons had ever saved at that point ever. I'll explain that later with some pictures. But that, I had a broken pelvis, other minor broken bones, rupture, just a lot of different things. But the big injuries was the pelvis, a lot of shrapnel lacerations, left leg amputation, the right leg pretty much at that point almost amputated, because I did most of that, and then my arm ripped open. So the story doesn't end there. There's a lot of complications that set in. First of them being this. The tourniquets got on, bleeding was controlled, but normally I'd be the one to call in the medical evacuation. I was the port observer, I was familiar with talking to the pilots. That was usually my job. I'm hurt, that usually next falls in line with the squad leader. He was trained to do it, but our squad leader that was out with us, he was an Iraq War veteran and had some PTSD issues of his own, and he just shut down, and he was unresponsive, and couldn't help, he crashed and shut down. So I actually had to help one of my other Marines call in the 9 line and go through the process. And the next complication that sets in, we're talking to the pilot, and he declined landing where we were to pick me up, because it wasn't uncommon the weeks prior to that these medical evacuation helicopters would come land and trigger further IEDs. Because where there's one, there's usually a daisy chain of IEDs around it, and it can be a disaster real quick. So the pilot wanted me to get carried back to that patrol base where he would land and get me at that patrol base. Like I said, that was like 800,000 meters away. So I ended up getting carried on a tarp. That's not me. That's from my deployment. I know the people on those little makeshift stretchers, but I had to get carried all the way, back to the patrol base. Next complication is the Taliban that we were engaging earlier. They heard me step on the IED, and they wanted to capitalize on our vulnerability. So they circled back around and started engaging us during our medical evacuation. So normally, where we patrol and every step was calculated and meticulous, my team's sprinting me through this cornfield, which by the way was riddled with IEDs. They found like 5 of them the next day when everybody told me in that field. So the whole evacuation takes about 45 minutes. I was conscious the whole time. The last 10 minutes I do really distinctively remember really quickly fading out. I remember a really most intense feeling of thirst that I've ever had in my life, which of course is equal blood loss. Yeah, my team was thankfully doing everything they could to keep me conscious, keep me awake. So I get to the helicopter and I get gassed out, and it turns out I was revived a couple times on that helo, which I didn't even find out until 6 months later, going through my medical records. But yeah, I was revived a couple times on that helicopter, and get sent to a couple field hospitals in Afghanistan in the first day or two. I'm unconscious this whole time. I just have really hazy memories. And within like 2 days, I get to Landstuhl, Germany. And then within a week, I get to where I'll be for the next 3 months, which is back in the States here. That's where my parents and family met with me. That's at National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Walter Reed is right next door. That's where all the Army guys go. All the Navy SEALs, Navy Marines. We go to National Naval Medical Center. So this is a picture, I think, 2 weeks after my injury. You can see my left arm pretty damaged, or casted up. It's my brother and sister. That's my mom and dad. You can tell I'm kind of drugged out of my mind here. This is me receiving my Purple Heart from the Commandant, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, General Amos, and Sergeant Major Ken. And keep in mind, this whole time, notice the miraculous medal on my chest. That gnarly scar on the stomach, believe it or not, that came from on that helicopter evacuation. I actually touched base with a paramedic that used to work on, wounded Marines at Lifetime the other week, and I never really understood what they did with that scar. But all of us that get injured, step-on bombs, have the same scar. But they literally cut you open and massage your heart manually. So, pretty intense. But again, you can see my left arm, still really bandaged. And the miraculous medal, still there. Early on, I wasn't, in a frame of mind to make a decision, but my mom and dad made a decision to try to keep my leg. There was no certainty, how successful it would be. Normally they'd amputate my right leg because of how damaged it was. But one of the kind of groundbreaking experimental things they did with me was flap surgery. And they took my right lat muscle from the back and transplanted it over my knee. Because my whole knee was blown out, no LCL, ACL. There needed to be something for coverage and makeshift stability. Not a medical expert, so I don't really know what else. But yeah, they transplanted that on my knee, so I got that 20-inch zipper scar on my right side. So I was there for 3 months, roughly, I don't know, I say between 30 and 50 surgeries, roughly 5 a week. There's a lot of eating restrictions around surgeries. So I ended up looking like a concentration camp victim, losing a lot of weight, probably got around 100 pounds. Still see the miraculous medal necklace around me. I think this is my first time actually sitting up in like a month. I remember being really dizzy because your equilibrium is all messed up. First time transferring into a wheelchair, maybe this was 2 months? Christmas Eve. Yeah. So just some pictures from that first 3 months in the hospital there at Bethesda. My brother, my family would usually be actually the experts over the nurses that would be rotating in. They were most familiar with how to dress and maneuver the delicacy of my leg, dress my wounds and everything, so that had been frequently changed. And that is a picture, I guess, from Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, my first time in a wheelchair. Yeah, so that was like 2 months and 2 weeks. 2 months and 2 weeks after my injury. That's the plastic surgeon, the mastermind behind everything that he did with my leg. Met a lot of famous people that come and visit, Pittsburgh Steelers. You guys know what you're really curious about. Who these people are. My high schoolers get a kick out of Troy Ball, Lance Ward, James Harrison, etc. General Mattis, Sergeant Major Brad Casal, he is the most famous Marine probably in the Iraq War. He has this iconic picture coming out of the House of Fallujah, all bloody. And then General Kelly. So I don't know, I'm not going to go into depth on this whole thing, but General Kelly, he's in the news a lot. He's appointed in Trump's cabinet originally. But his son was actually my platoon commander. So his dad, he was working in the Pentagon under Secretary of Defense Gates at that point, so he'd come visit me. So his son was my platoon commander, the one that told us, to go back out. I was pretty close with him, of course, but he actually got killed a month later by, again, stepping out of the night. And there's me at his grave in Arlington. So by the end of that 3 months, my surgeries for the most part concluded, and this was the state of what was going on down there. I had my skin graft surgery. My whole right leg is basically a complex skin graft, and you can see the knees all swollen up. It was like the size of a basketball. The next place I went to the VA here as an inpatient for 3 months. Basically to let all this heal to a point where I could even begin rehab, where I could begin weight bearing and using prosthetics. So I was there for 3 months as an inpatient, and then another 6 months or something doing rehab, learning how to weight bear again. Just kind of breeze through some of this. First steps on a really simple mechanical leg, a knee, sports harness systems. I concluded my rehab. I spent the last year of my rehab in a really state-of-the-art, sophisticated prosthetic center, the greatest in the world actually, in San Antonio, Texas. Got a hardware upgrade there with a really expensive prosthetic leg. It was at Brooke Army Medical Center. Specifically, it was called Center for the Intrepid. So altogether, it was 2 years of hospital and rehab. 2 years, and that's me outside of that facility. Met some friends. And okay, so that's my rehab journey. It was 2 years. Concluded, got discharged medically from the Marine Corps in 2012. So I'm going to jump back a little here. Here's where we shift gears into the spiritual component of the story. I'm already running really short on time. By the time my unit actually gets back from Afghanistan, again, we took the most casualties out of any unit since the campaign began in 2001. It was instantly, in the history books. So we took 25 KIA, hundreds wounded, 60 of us missing limbs. When my unit got back, I was still in the hospital, but they had a remembrance ceremony for all of the KIA killed in action. So I was still in rough shape, wasn't independent yet, so my family flew with me over there. It was the first time that I got to actually reunite with the Marines that I was with, that I was serving with, that Navy corpsman that saved my life. So it was the first time I got to connect with them. Here's some pictures of that. But most interestingly, that Navy corpsman that applied all those tourniquets saved my life. The first time I got to talk to him, the second I see him after the ceremony, he bolts over to me and says, "Faust, I got to talk to you. I got to tell you something. You're going to want to, kill me after I share this with you." But he said, a miracle happened, so we're all good. So he proceeds to tell me, and my mom is documenting this whole thing. That's why I have these pictures. This is that exact conversation. So he's telling me, well, first of all, I was the very first live, trauma victim that he ever had to treat in theater. The corpsmen would rotate in really frequently with the intensity of their job. He was brand new. So he did everything great, got the tourniquets on, did everything, perfectly, except he made one really bad mistake. And he tells me he tried to give me morphine, and that's the biggest no-no with my injury. Even I knew that from the million times that I took on that lifesaver course. With my blood loss, it would have slowed your heart to where it just infallibly it would have killed me. But he says, in the intensity and chaos of the situation, he took the morphine out, put it in my leg, but something restrained him from administering the plunger. He thought it was something defective with the unit, so he pulled out another, tried it, same thing. Just he couldn't do it, and he couldn't explain it. It was really bizarre. He talked to his other Navy corpsman friends, and it had never happened to anyone else. So he's telling me this, and again, I'm a lukewarm Lutheran. I'm making no connection with the miraculous medal I'm wearing or anything. And I'm like, oh, that's lucky. Kind of wrote it off, and I forgive you, and I just write it off, right? So, of course, that's going to play a meaningful role here. Reevaluating the whole story through the lens of faith, right? So that's another picture from that exchange. So after discharging from the Marine Corps, I move up here to Minnesota. I go to school for a little bit, move in with my brother, but that inaugurates kind of 2 years of a really dark, depressing time for me. Struggles with adapting. My whole life has changed. Everything I loved in life before was taken away. Have to figure out a new passion, a new direction, something that I'm interested in. turn into things that aren't going to fill that void. Everybody kind of knows that story. But it was a rough 2 years adapting to a new life. Slowly, time naturally heals that and brings you out of that. But also, I met my wife. Our moms graduated high school together and set us up on a blind date. That helped a lot. Jared Allen from the Vikings actually has a charitable organization for building homes for severely wounded warriors. I purchased my land with all my savings, and then in a month, he offered to build me a home on that land. So that was a pretty big deal, having a place that I can be comfortable and call home that works with my disability and wheelchair and everything. Here's some pictures from that whole process. And I got married, still lukewarm Lutheran, believe it or not. Got married in 2016 at St. Victoria. My wife, cradle Catholic, so thanks be to God, we got married in the Catholic Church. I was still a Lutheran at this point. She was Catholic, so called a Bob White. I ministered that wedding. Yeah, so back up 1 sec. So, man, we're really running short on time. I don't know. So the next meaningful thing that happens is a year later, a year after getting married, I'm still lukewarm Lutheran. Believe it or not, I never went through that rebellious phase, being mad at God over what happened to me. And for whatever reason, I still paid religion no meaningful attention. And that all changed with one really bizarre moment. At 1 o'clock in the morning at night, my wife was working as a pediatric nurse at a children's hospital, a night shift. It was like 1 a.m. I was waiting for her to come home. And totally unprovoked, and this is usually how grace works. Like St. Augustine talks about prevenient grace. There's nothing you can merit God's grace. You can only cooperate with it, right? So totally unprovoked, in bed, I just get hit with this really powerful spiritual experience that's really hard to articulate in words, but I would call it a moment of grand discernment, where I could just see the state of my soul crystal clear. I knew I convicted myself of my own hypocrisy of professing and titled only to be Christian, but if I really truly believe that, why would that not be the center and foundation of your life? I mean, if anyone takes that to prayer, it's really evident right away if you just start peeling that kind of conundrum there. So I saw a vision of my soul, and I knew what I had to do. And basically, it lit a fire. It lit a fire. I wanted to be Christian. I wanted to practice my faith, and yeah, again, it's really hard to articulate into words, but it just lit something inside of me and changed something. And I just locked in. From that moment forward, the very next day, I started exploring, where do I need to go within Christianity? What Protestant denomination? Where do I go to the church? Where can I learn more? Of course, I knew there's 30,000 different Protestant denominations. I knew a little bit about the Catholic Church at that point, so I started investigating, where does the fullness of the truth lie? And long story short, I just devoured content. I was reading a book a day, podcast videos, talking to people. But within about a month, I convinced myself intellectually, okay, I gotta become a Catholic. It's the Catholic Church. And a really interesting story, a part of that process is Padre Pio's name kept popping up everywhere. And as someone that has gotten a degree, a graduate degree in theology, and continues to devour theological content, I recognize how bizarre it is that his name kept popping up everywhere. So I didn't know anything about him. It captured my curiosity, and I finally got this book. I'm like, all right, I'm going to figure out who St. Padre Pio is. I read this. It's a beefy 500-page book, really thoroughly referenced and cited, and it just blew me away, particularly the theology of suffering, which is a distinctive feature of the Catholic Church. It blew me away, and it was kind of the cherry on top, and I was like, all right, I got to become Catholic. That's Padre Pio. Of course, he's blessed with a lot of mystical gifts. He bore the stigmata. That's a whole other story if you're curious about this. Find me, talk to me. A lot of people know about Padre Pio around here. But so that was the cherry on top. I decided to schedule a meeting with Father Bob White at St. Victoria, who married us the year prior, and asked, what do I need to do to become Catholic? And I met with him, and the first thing that he said to me before I could share anything, he didn't even know what I was there for. The first thing that he did is he invited me to a pilgrimage that St. Victoria was taking to go venerate the relics of St. Padre Pio. So that was like a cherry on the cherry on top. And it was just really cool. Maybe St. Padre Pio had an intercessory role in this whole process too, which makes sense if you read any of his spiritual letters. He had a profound devotion to American servicemen, actually, because a lot of them made pilgrimages during World War II to his monastery in Italy. So I did that. Here's pictures from that. And eventually, I did the RCIA program, came into the church on my birthday, Easter Vigil 2018. Here's a picture there. And like I said, it lit a fire in me. I found that passion, not only just for orientation in life, but passion for philosophy and theology. So I pursued a master's degree at the St. Paul Seminary, started having kids. Here's some pictures from the parish. These are current pictures. Now I have 3 boys, all under the age of 5. Just some more pictures of that. After the seminary, I spent the last 2 years teaching at St. Thomas Academy, an all-boys military school. I was teaching sophomore theology, sacraments, and morality. And then I just, as you know, recently got hired here. So I think here's what I'm going to do. I have like 6 minutes left of my speech, but I understand Mass starts in 5 minutes. And for those that have to go to Mass, you can go to Mass. But those that want to stay for the next 6, 7 minutes, I'll wrap this up. So feel free to comment on anyone if they have to leave. Go ahead. I don't know why this speech is longer than
What's that, 2 hours?
yeah, I'm used to giving this. It takes an hour, hour and a half. So. All right, so just to wrap this whole thing up, that's the story, but it's also, there's a purpose to the story. There's a purpose why I'm sharing it as well. And I would encourage, I just want to give some reflections, maybe give you a takeaway, something, to take with you leaving here. And that's this. I just humbly encourage and implore you all to consider the big questions in life, the existential questions, the foundational questions, take it to prayer, give it some thought. It was these considerations that were actually the basis of that profound moment of grand discernment in bed, right? That reoriented my life, recentered my life. It was all downstream from the consideration of these big existential questions. The answers to these questions, they comprise a worldview, or the skeletal outlines of a worldview. And what does a worldview do? It assigns ultimate worth to something. It assigns values, priorities, goals, right? Everything we do in life, this ultimate end of life, this worldview is present in every single one of our actions. It informs, animates all of our human activity. So not only was that relevant for me individually, it's relevant especially for today, because I would posit that our culture right now, it's the first in history that was once deeply Christian, but by a slow and thorough process, we are currently ridding ourselves of its Christian basis. And that, I could spend a whole hour unpacking. That's a bold statement. But I think, if we're all generally practicing Christians here, I think we all recognize that to be the truth. The modern world, we're incessantly hounded, cajoled by gospels of various kinds, schemes of salvation, conceptions and paths to happiness, and flourishing, and fulfillment that are a lot of times wrapped in very highly attractive but deceptive clothing. So I would venture that the key battles that we face today in our culture are intellectual ones. And by intellectual, I don't mean academic primarily. Rather, what it refers to and what it's called for is that intellectual life that's characteristic of the early church, its early centuries. A life possessed by literally every Christian to some degree. So it's not a matter of academic degrees, but concisely this intellectual life that I am advocating here, it entails a conversion of the mind to a Christian vision of reality and of a readiness, to live out the ramifications of that worldview, of that reality. And that's a whole thing to do. But we need a compelling Christian narrative that presents an intellectual but also charitable counter to this prevailing secular vision. We need what we need is a rearticulation, a reassertion of those perennial truths that can provide those that are languishing under the malnourishment of this modern spiritual diet, a way out of that anguish. Because I've said it before, and I'll say it now, and I'll keep saying it because it's true and it's incredibly important. The most pressing modern crisis today is what Fulton Sheen called existential neurosis. Pope Francis calls it existential poverty, with his call to evangelize the existential peripheries. But what does that mean? Existential neurosis, this inability, or I'd say first, characterized by this anxiety of life that typifies modern living, but also an inability, to answer those existential questions. What is it all about? What are we doing here? Like, what are we shooting towards? Why are we here? Those things. Not only an inability, but a reluctance to even, like an unwillingness to grapple with it. And normally with my students, I flush that out and, why do people avoid these questions? And I would go about it this way. Usually I'll deal with the answers and everything, but with the interest of time. I would say there's two operative attributes or virtues that are needed to grapple with the existential questions. Humility and courage. Humility is needed because you need an openness. There needs to be docility, receptivity. You're not your own God, to recognize that maybe there's an authority outside of yourself, right? To be open to that truth. But two, what is truth? If you ever apprehend a truth, your intellect apprehends the truth, what happens? There is demanded a conformity of the will. A lot of people shy away from it on this basis. They don't have that conviction, that courage, that fortitude that's needed. Because especially when you're dealing with these foundational existential questions about God, about life, about reality, if you apprehend a truth, that calls for a radical reorientation of life, which will be uncomfortable. It will entail suffering. It will entail, new values, priorities, changed relationships. It's incredibly difficult. It's not easy. Nor is it supposed to be easy. Another thing I tell my students is, the most meaningful, valuable things you will ever do in life always entail self-donation, giving. It entails a sacrifice, suffering. We all get glimpses of that. If you're a student here, think about, the sacrifices you make to be part of a football team or something, right? You're donating time, effort, energy, off-season, workouts, everything, right? You're proud of it, right? And then for the parents and grandparents here, think about your kids, right? There's nothing in this life that is going to entail more, self-giving and sacrifice than raising kids. That's why we're naturally and healthily, proud of our kids. So imagine the import that has when you're grappling with religion, right? So bottom line, people are starving. People are crying today. You see all around us, we are starving for meaning, for purpose, for value, for objective truth, for identity. In the Catholic Church, the Christian worldview, we're primed to give that to people, and that's especially my motivation. Here, my new role in this parish, I'm going to do what I can in my small role, through the workings of God and grace, of course, to address this problem, to share the treasure of our faith, and to present a compelling and intellectual Catholic, to present a case that's compelling and intellectual for the truth of the Catholic worldview. And also, furthermore, to inspire and maybe lead and instill that fortitude that is needed to actually live your faith boldly, living your faith boldly, because we're living in an increasingly hostile world to Christianity. And, we need to take up that cross and follow the Lord, just like, he says we need to do in Matthew 16:24. So, with that said, no surprise, it's reflected in the programming here. I'm new. This is something that I'm going to be offering. Everything I just ranted about there for 7 minutes is going to be fleshed out and elaborated in much more detail in this Foundations course. It's free. I humbly ask you to register, give us a heads up if you're going. Basically, this is about establishing a robust Catholic worldview, which is always a response to the question of happiness and the reality of suffering. You're not going to want to miss that fourth class because that's about suffering. Everybody's always fascinated about suffering. And for good reason, because that is the biggest obstacle people usually have to God, to religion. So we all desire happiness. We all desire, perfect satiation of our desires, our yearnings. That's an immutable feature inscribed in our nature. Everybody desires your happiness. You can't not desire your happiness. Right? But we all encounter suffering and evil and injustices and terrible things in life, right? How do those things square? How do those things reconcile? What is the role for theology and divine revelation? This is going to be a really hard-hitting good course, but that's that. It's open to anyone. The atheist, the agnostic, the truth seeker, those that are just curious, the lukewarm Catholic, Protestant, or even if you're a Catholic and you're, frankly failed in your formation as a child, the type that's taught to do this and don't do that, but never the why, never the underlying foundation. This will be perfect for you. And you don't have to agree. I'm used to pushback. I'm used to dialogue and discussion. I invite it. I'm not judging anyone. I'm here to help. I'm here to serve. I'm always open to field questions. Anytime you see me around here, or all my contact information is on the parish website. So, yeah, there's nothing more worthy of your time, your focus, your contemplation, because there's nothing more important in life to square this away. Figure out your worldview, what's true, and align yourself to that truth. So, that's it. Hope to see you there. And again, thank you for taking your valuable time to be here and listen to me. I know I went a little long here. But I hope it bore some fruit. I hope it was worth your time. And truly, I appreciate it. So, that's all.